Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. India and the European Union finalise a free trade agreement after 2 decades of talks. EU chief Ursula von der Leyen says the deal creates a 2 billion person market. In a visit to Beijing, Finland's Prime Minister says China can help end Russia's war by pressuring President Putin. President Xi Jinping calls for upholding an uncensored global order. Russian attacks across Ukraine kill 4 people and wound nearly 24, officials have said. President Zelensky says the strikes undermine peace efforts and calls for more pressure on Moscow. Hamas seeks to keep its police and civil servants in a new Gaza administration, sources have said. Israel rejects any role for Hamas as ceasefire terms tie withdrawals to disarmament. Top federal immigration leaders begin leaving Minneapolis after a second U.S. citizen is fatally shot by officers. The White House turns to border czar Tom Homan to take control as tensions remain high. North Korea launches 2 ballistic missiles towards the Sea of Japan, according to Japan and South Korea. The projectiles splash down outside Japan's ease in Pyongyang's second test this month. China says it is ready to deepen cooperation with Britain as Prime Minister Keir Starmer visits this week. Starmer is set to meet President Xi Jinping and other senior Chinese leaders. Denmark and Greenland announced talks with Germany and France after President Trump renews pressure over Greenland. The visits aim to shore up European support amid strained transatlantic ties. We turn now to Europe's east, and officials have said that Russian forces have killed 4 people and wounded almost 24 others, including 2 children and a pregnant woman, in separate attacks across Ukraine. In Sloviansk, a married couple were killed while their 20-year-old son survived. A Russian drone strike in Odessa wounded at least 23 people and damaged homes, schools and a church. And a 39-week pregnant woman was among the injured. In Zaporozhye, a 58-year-old was killed in their home during another drone attack. And the Ukrainian Air Force reported Russia launched 165 drones overnight, hitting infrastructure in Lviv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the strikes, saying they undermine ongoing diplomacy and urged allies to increase pressure on Moscow. Meanwhile, Russia claimed it captured 2 more villages in Zaporozhye and Kharkiv regions. Joining us now is David K. Johnston. He's an author and journalist. He joins us live from New York to discuss this further. David, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this comes after the first trilateral meet of the war, including the United States, Russia and Ukraine, which took place in Abu Dhabi, with them set to reconvene again on the 1st of February. Moscow, of course, is intensifying these drone attacks while diplomacy is supposedly ongoing. Does this suggest that Russia is perhaps negotiating in bad faith, or does it see this escalation as leverage at the negotiating table?
Well, I think both points you made, Thomas, are true. The Russians believe that this is a war they will win over time. It's a war of attrition in their view. And this tactics, attacking apartment buildings, hospitals, places like that. This has been Russian military strategy way back to the Tsarist era and the aristocrats who were known as the boyars. It's always been the way Russians have conducted warfare. It's without any regard to what we might consider civilian or inappropriate targets, like an obstetrics hospital. So I think they're going to continue doing this, and they are simply trying to get more and more time to prosecute the invasion of Ukraine.
And what about Russia's targeting here of civilian areas? What is the conduct here? Is it militarily, psychological, or political warfare here that they, of course, are driving as well as the military one?
Well, the focus is to drive down the resolve of the Ukrainian people to resist being dominated again by the Kremlin. That's the clear focus, is to terrorize people and get them to say it's not worth it and to give up the fight. We know from studies of bombing in World War II and bombing in Vietnam that really doesn't work. If people have a resolve to be free, this does not stop them, but it certainly disrupts things. And it's interesting that they, instead of attacking more energy infrastructure, have now gone back in Odessa and in the eastern part of Ukraine to hitting civilian targets rather than, residential targets, rather than energy infrastructure, which Russians have been trying to degrade because it's winter.
And David, of course, Zelensky has asked Western allies to keep pressure coming on Moscow. However, there has been sanctions on Russia for almost 4 years now, and the war, of course, still continues, and their war machine keeps running. If pressure on Moscow increases, what form is that likely to materialize as, given that there is all these sanctions in place? The seizure of frozen assets has also taken place, but of course the European Union voted against using those frozen assets within the bloc. What new forms could any more pressure on Moscow take?
Well, first and foremost, undoing that European Union decision not to turn over Russian assets to Ukraine would be powerful and beneficial, but that's seen as overly provocative by the Europeans. The efforts to limit oil exports by Russia have not been as successful as anticipated because there are pipelines to China. And of course, the biggest single place that Russian oil is going is a refinery on the west coast of India, which in turn is sending diesel fuel to, of all places, Ukraine. So everybody sort of has dirty hands here. But there is still more that Western powers could do to tighten up on Russian finance, to make it more costly for Putin to pursue the war. I'm also was thinking this morning about what could be done about the game that's being played, the evil game by the Russians, where they are persuading poor men in Bangladesh to come to Russia for good paying jobs. And when they arrive, they are put into military uniforms, given a bit of training, and sent to the Ukrainian front. That's something the United Nations and every other country should be utterly and totally denouncing and taking actions to stop.
And of course, they're set to meet again on February the 1st in the UAE capital, Abu Dhabi. The United States, of course, will be keeping tabs on this situation. 4 people have been killed today. How do you think the Trump administration and its envoys will be looking at this? Do you think it will be looking at Russia? Do you think it will be looking at putting more pressure on Russia, or do you think it will be condemning these actions?
If there's any condemnation, it'll be mild enough that Putin isn't going to particularly care. Putin's long game here is, let's keep talking because I can keep pressing my military forward. Now, he's gained very, very little territory in the last 2 years. The butcher bill per acre is possibly the highest in the history of the world. But Putin clearly has no way to back down, having made this so important to his people. Even though he's in a dictatorial position, you cannot completely ignore the society that you're dictating to. So I don't see any way for Putin to back out unless he feels threatened in a whole new way. And given they have nuclear weapons, not likely.
David, do stay with us as we move over from Eastern Europe to West Asia. And the Iranian Foreign Ministry has asserted that the country is fully capable of defending its sovereignty, responding directly to President Donald Trump's warning of a massive US naval armada moving towards the Middle East. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baqai has stated that Iran is prepared to deliver a comprehensive and regret-inducing response to any act of aggression. He emphasized that Iran's resolve remains unshaken by the arrival of foreign warships and that its military readiness is higher than ever following the Battle of June 2025. Let's take a listen in to what the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman had to say.
جمهوری اسلامی ایران هم نسبت به توانمندی‌های خودش اطمینان داره، هم تجربه‌های قبلی از جمله تجربه نبرد قهرمانانه خرداد ماه رو در ذهن داره. توانمندتر از هر زمانی قطعاً به هر گونه تعرضی پاسخی فراگیر و پشیمان کننده خواهد داد. صرف برچسب زنی به یک نهادی که برآمده از متن مردم ایران هست، نهادی که مسئولیت صیانت از یک ملت رو بر عهده داره، مسئولیت امنیت خلیج فارس رو عهده‌دار هست، نهادی که بزرگترین نقش رو در مبارزه با تروریسم داعشی ایفا کرده، یک عمل سخیف و غیر منطقی است و قاعدتاً خب جمهوری اسلامی ایران حق خودش میدونه که متقابلاً اقدام.
David, of course, we have heard similar statements coming out of Iran before during these protests where Donald Trump previously threatened the Iranian regime with direct strikes inside of Iran. However, this statement comes as Donald Trump, of course, moves what he calls an armada over to the Persian Gulf. Now, obviously, Iran suffered huge damages when it came to its missile capabilities and other military capabilities in that 12-day war with Israel. Does it still have powerful military capabilities to cause real damage to both the United States, which it says will be its military targets in the Middle East, and of course Israel, which it has said is another legitimate target in the region if things do escalate?
Well, this is just a show of force. This is like a dog pulling back its lips and showing you its teeth. Trump has sent the Lincoln Carrier Group. It's going to be offshore. There's no armada. There are not enough soldiers and Marines on those ships, and it's a small number of ships. It's not the entire normal support group for a carrier. And Iran has a military with close to 1 million people in arms and another 500,000 or more who've been trained because they served in the military. So it would be a formidable force. And Trump is under pressure from his base, the MAGA group, to not get entangled in foreign wars. So other than airstrikes, whether done by jet fighters and bombers or drones, I don't think you're going to see any significant military action. On the Iranian side, they don't have the capability of launching a missile at the U.S. They could attack U.S. targets in the Middle East, but they don't have long-range capability.
Of course, during the protests, which saw an internet blackout in Iran, Donald Trump asked Iranian people to take over their institutions and said that help was on the way. Is this so-called armada that help?
I don't think that Donald has any serious strategic commitment to helping the Iranian protesters. And let's remember that Iran has an average population, a median population, age in the early 30s, which means only a small percentage of the population of Iran remembers life under the Shah. It was a vicious government, just like the one they have now. And so the forces that are working against the Ayatollahs are building over time. And this will take time to play out. It's not going to happen overnight.
David, how much would of course, talking about the broader geopolitical impact that United States and Iran at loggerheads might come out with. Of course, Iran has alliances with China, Russia. If the United States did strike and even destabilize the Iranian regime, what outcome would that have on those alliances and the broader geopolitical situation?
Oh, it would very much drive the Iranians closer to both Beijing and Moscow. One of the fascinating failures of American foreign policy is that the Persian peoples and the Russian peoples have been at each other's throats for 1,000 years until roughly the last 40 to 50 years, where the U.S. has managed to drive Tehran toward the Kremlin. And this is not well thought out policy by any presidential administration. Iran is the most culturally, economically, and sophisticated country in the Middle East. It is the natural leader in the Middle East. This is all tied up in the politics of Shia versus Sunni Muslims. And U.S. Diplomatic and military activity has shown no deep understanding of that, or how to mitigate the current regime of the Ayatollahs, who basically want people to live in a 9th century society. Every step that the U.S. has taken along with its ally Israel has only further worsened relationships with Iran. Even if there's a new government and the Ayatollahs are overthrown, it's not going to be friendly to the U.S. at all, given what's going on at the moment.
David, do stay with us once more as we move over to Latin America. And Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, has projected a $1.4 billion surge in oil investment in 2026, a roughly 55% increase over the prior year, as our government pushes through reforms opening the energy sector to foreign and private capital. Let's listen in to the interim leader.
Empresa mixta, nosotros ya tenemos al día de hoy 29 CPP suscritos. El año pasado la inversión fue casi de $900 millones y para este año se estima y se proyecta una inversión de $1.400 millones. De tal manera que no podemos sino decir que son modelos exitosos. El modelo Chevron tuvo su base en la ley antibloqueo. Tuvo su base, el modelo, como modelo de gestión. Es el mismo concepto CPP aplicado a un acuerdo con Chevron y que le ha permitido, voy a hacer una infidencia, Mariano, si me permite, porque también ha sido vocero en esta actividad, ha permitido que hoy Chevron tenga la producción más alta en los últimos 25 años en Venezuela. Chevron tiene un siglo en Venezuela. ¿Qué quiere decir?
A hydrocarbons reform bill before the National Assembly would ease restrictions that previously required majority state control through PDVSA and allow private and foreign companies greater operational freedom. While this has encouraged initial capital inflows, analysts warn that further legal clarity is needed to spur deeper long-term investment. The oil reform push also occurs against broader geopolitical currents. The United States has pressed for access to Venezuelan crude and reforms, while Rodriguez has sought to balance foreign pressure with assertions of sovereignty. Thank you very much for joining us. David joins us once again. I want to take time back a little bit for this discussion. Of course, straight after the capture of Nicolas Maduro on the 3rd of this year, Donald Trump gathered US oil executives around a table in a meeting in which the ExxonMobil, one of the United States' biggest oil companies, called Venezuela plain and simply uninvestable. Is Delcy Rodriguez's government now taking the correct steps to appease Donald Trump? How do you see this situation moving forward on United States and other foreign oil companies operating in the country now it's making these legal changes?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head with appeasing Donald Trump. The Venezuelan oil industry has been suffering from a lack of investment now for a couple of decades. The assertion widely repeated by journalists that Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserve is bunk. It came from two dictators ago, Hugo Chavez. The known oil reserves are around 100 billion barrels. That is roughly half of what's in Saudi Arabia. And well, $1 billion is a big, huge number. This claim that there'll be 1.4 billion of capital investment this year, it's peanuts. To rebuild the infrastructure for oil in Venezuela will take at least $10 billion a year, and by some estimates closer to 20. So we're talking about 15% perhaps of what is needed to rebuild the infrastructure for oil in Venezuela. Nobody is going to invest in this politically unstable situation where the Maduro regime's lieutenants are still in charge, and the person who almost certainly won the election last time around is sitting in the wings, and we're not sure what Donald Trump will do because he's so mercurial.
Indeed, well, we never do. David K. Johnston, thank you very much for joining us and taking the time. It is always a great pleasure to talk to you. We now move on and over to the US directly, and a massive winter storm sweeping across the US has left more than 500,000 people without power and killed at least 30 as dangerously cold Arctic air grips much of the country. Freezing temperatures from New Mexico to Maine are slowing recovery efforts, with forecasters warning that much of the northern United States will remain below freezing through February the 1st. Record low temperatures have also hit southern states, which are less equipped for extreme winter weather. Heavy snow and ice have paralyzed transport nationwide. Authorities say at least 30 deaths have been linked to the storm, including cases of hypothermia and weather-related accidents. 7 people were killed when a small plane crashed during takeoff in snowy conditions in Maine, and multiple deaths are also under investigation in New York City. Power outages remain widespread, particularly across Tennessee, Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Officials are opening emergency warming shelters as ice-laden trees continue to damage power lines. Meteorologists say the storm, driven by a distorted polar vortex, is especially challenging because so many states are affected simultaneously. Joining us now is Desmond Majek Odunmi. He is a political and environmental activist. He joins us live from Lagos in Nigeria to discuss this further. Over 30 people dead, Desmond, in the United States as this biting cold sweeps the nation. Of course, Donald Trump, a huge climate skeptic. How are Donald Trump's policies harming the environment, and of course the rhetoric that he is pushing, which of course leads to weather catastrophes like the one we're seeing across the United States right now?
Very, very astute question. It's like if you have just a little bonfire and you decide, okay, I must put this bonfire out, and you want to use a big bucket of water to douse the bonfire, but then the big daddy in the house says, no, you can't do that. Use a cup of water to put it out. Come on. The reality is that climate change is causing all these severities of weather conditions. We were told it would happen decades ago, and it has started to happen a couple of decades ago. And in the last decade, we've been experiencing the hottest weather ever recorded on planet Earth for thousands and thousands of years. So he is pushing back on policies that were designed to reduce the carbon pollution, particularly, because that's what's causing the global warming. Of course, some people would say, well, I mean, if it's warming, why are we getting these severe colder winters? It's basic science. This earth is miraculously woven together. The gases in the atmosphere have always been at a fixed sort of ratio, and then you have certain wind conditions. In this particular one that you referred to, It's called the polar vortex, a massive sort of spiraling of wind that keeps the cold, freezing temperature of the polar region within that region. But when you now weaken the vortex, as has happened, this freezing air comes out. And the more heating we have in the atmosphere, the more weakening of this vortex. So Trump is going to find it very difficult to play golf when he has snow all over his golf course.
That is very true. Desmond, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, and thank you very much for taking the time. We unfortunately have run out of it, but we finish this bulletin with some news from the tech world. And according to auto industry data, electric vehicle sales have overtaken petrol cars in the European Union for the first time. Battery electric registrations also surpassed petrol cars across the wider European market, including Britain and Norway, as continent-wide car sales continue to grow year on year. Chinese automakers like BYD, Changan and Geely are intensifying competition, pushing European brands such as Volkswagen and BMW to ramp up new EV models. The EU recently proposed to relax emissions rules, moving away from its original 2035 ban on combustion engine vehicles. The move marks a new era, with electric vehicles rapidly becoming the future of European roads. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.